After a Michigan woman was reported missing in the Bahamas, the sailboat she and her husband were traveling on was seized by the U.S. Coast Guard. In a video posted to social media, Lynette Hooker's daughter said the boat, named Soulmate, was moved by two men from where it was docked in the Bahamas. According to data from marinetraffic.com, Soulmate is now in the waters near Fort St. Lucie, Florida. Lynette was reported missing by her husband, Brian.
A sailing couple's dream yacht is now wrapped in crime scene tape. The U.S. Coast Guard just seized Soulmate in Florida, agents swarming aboard for forensic testing, while Lynette Hooker remains missing after vanishing from their dinghy one night in the Bahamas. They were living the sailing life as the sailing hookers. Then she disappeared at sea. Now their boat is in federal hands, and the questions are only growing. Welcome to Case Signal, the channel dedicated to the cases that deserve more than a headline. If the disappearance of a woman who loved the sea, who documented her life in sun-drenched Instagram posts and YouTube videos, who smiled at the camera from the deck of a boat called Soulmate, if that kind of story is the reason you're here, then you belong here. Subscribe, because the cases we cover are always cases where the truth refuses to stay underwater. Lynette Hooker was not the kind of woman who blended into the background. She was spirited, adventurous, and deeply present on social media. The kind of person who posted videos of herself paddleboarding through Caribbean waters, pointing excitedly at wildlife drifting beneath the surface, her joy radiating through the screen. She and her husband, Brian Hooker, documented their travels through videos on YouTube under the handle @the Hookers, and shared moments from their trips on Instagram under the handle _Hookers. Their sailboat had a Facebook page of its own. The About section read simply, "Photographer/sailor living my best life." That sailboat had a name. They called it Soulmate. Lynette's Facebook is filled with photos and videos of herself on the boat or in the water. Sunsets, views while sailing, paddleboarding, as well as photos of herself and her husband. To anyone scrolling through, it looked like a dream retirement. Two people who had left the ordinary world behind and chosen the open ocean. The couple had been married for more than 20 years and chronicled their adventures sailing around the Caribbean on their Sailing Hookers social media accounts. By all visible appearances, the Hookers had found something rare. A shared life built entirely around freedom, beauty, and each other. But appearances, as this story will show, can be the most dangerous fiction of all. Lynette Hooker was born and raised in Michigan, a state as far from the ocean as a person can get in the continental United States. She was 55 years old at the time of her disappearance. A mother, a daughter, a woman with roots deep in the Midwest. Her mother, Darlene Hamlet, owned the lakefront home in the Sand Lake community of Lenawee County, Michigan, a tight-knit community where about 30% of residents live there year-round, with others residing there part-time like the Hookers. Lynette had a daughter from a previous relationship, Carly Aylesworth, who would later become one of the most vocal and heartbroken figures in the investigation into her mother's fate. Brian Hooker was 59 years old, a former Marine 4 years older than his wife, a man described by those who knew the couple as mechanically capable, experienced on the water, and difficult to read. The two had been together for roughly 25 years. Aylesworth described the relationship as rocky at best, saying her mother and stepfather had a history of not getting along, especially when they drank. Friends and neighbors in Michigan knew the Hookers as a couple who came and went, spending stretches of time at the lakefront property before disappearing again to sea. The sailing life had not always been smooth. In late January 2024, Lynette described the marriage as having barely survived the first month of sailing. "We were married 21 years. Our marriage lasted 6 weeks cruising." These were not vague impressions. They were words Lynette typed herself, to a close friend named Marnie Stevenson, a fellow boater whom the Hookers had encountered during a stopover near Bradenton, Florida in late 2023. CBS News obtained private messages Lynette sent to Stevenson in early 2024, around the time the couple briefly separated, painting a troubling picture of their marriage. In those messages, Lynette was direct about her pain. "It was real bad. I can't be out there with him." She had left Brian at that point to stay with her mother in Florida. When Stevenson asked whether the couple might reconcile, Lynette's response was unequivocal. "I guess it was too much closeness. We decided to call it quits. I'm not going back." He went back. By late February 2024, when Marnie messaged to ask whether things were improving, Lynette replied with heart emojis and a thumbs up. And so the cycle continued. as it does in so many troubled relationships. The pull of 25 years together, the shared investment in a boat, a life and identity built around the sea. The reasons people stay are rarely simple. They are layered and human, and sometimes, in hindsight, they are the reasons stories like this one get told. The backstory of violence between Brian and Lynette Hooker did not begin in 2026. It stretched back more than a decade. In February 2015, police in Michigan were called to the Hookers' home following an altercation in which both spouses accused each other of assault. The details of that night were murky. Brian Hooker was intoxicated and had blood coming from his nose. He told police his wife, who he said was also drunk, had struck him in the face multiple times. Lynette, for her part, gave a drastically different account. She said her husband had choked her and punched her once during the altercation, that she was trying to get into a room upstairs where she believed her children had locked themselves, and that Brian was the one who became violent. Officers could see physical evidence of Brian's injuries, his swollen, bloody nose, but Lynette had no visible injuries at the time of their arrival. Lynette was the one arrested and charged with assault and battery/simple assault. The warrant was ultimately denied due to insufficient evidence as to who had started the assault. The couple had an attorney at the time, Mark Hunting, who later told NBC News that attorney-client privilege prevented him from commenting on the matter. That incident sat in the background of their lives like a splinter that was never properly removed. Brian Hooker's own record was not without its complications. Court records show he was acquitted of a child abuse charge in 2006. The full context of that acquittal was not publicly detailed, but its existence, alongside the 2015 incident, formed a pattern of legal contact that investigators would later find deeply relevant. What Lynette's daughter knew, what Lynette herself had disclosed, went further than police paperwork. Carly Aylesworth told CNN that her mother had previously confided that Brian Hooker had choked her. CNN was unable to confirm the incident with law enforcement. More alarming still, Aylesworth said that in January her mother had told her that Brian Hooker threatened to throw her off their boat during a fight in 2024. Threatened to throw her off the boat. Months before she disappeared from a boat in the dark waters of the Bahamas. Aylesworth says Lynette told her this. Lynette, according to those who knew her, had chosen to stay anyway. And she had warned a friend. And then she had gone back. By early April 2026, the Hookers were sailing through the Abaco Islands, one of the most picturesque stretches of water in the entire Bahamas, a chain of cays and harbors that draws sailors and vacationers from around the world. Hope Town, a small pastel-colored settlement on Elbow Cay, is the kind of place that appears on travel magazine covers. Its striped candy cane lighthouse is one of the most photographed in the Western Hemisphere. The waters surrounding it are shallow and clear enough to see the bottom in daylight. At night, those same waters become something else entirely. According to a preliminary investigation, the man who reported his wife missing told the Royal Bahamas Police Force that he and his wife departed from Hope Town at about 7:30 p.m. on the night of Saturday, April 4, 2026. They were traveling from Hope Town to Elbow Cay, returning to the Soulmate in a small hard-bottom dinghy, 8 feet long, open-topped, with a motor attached. It was after sunset. The conditions, Brian would later tell authorities, were deteriorating rapidly. What happened on the water that night is known in its official form only through Brian Hooker's account. Brian told authorities that rough conditions, including high winds and choppy waves, caused his wife to fall overboard. Strong currents subsequently carried her away, and he lost sight of her, police reported that Brian told them. He said that Lynette, at the moment she went into the water, was wearing the engine's safety lanyard, the kill switch cord designed to cut engine power if the operator is thrown overboard. With the lanyard gone, the motor died. Without power on their dinghy, Brian says he attempted to paddle to shore, and the little boat eventually drifted through the Sea of Abaco, washing ashore hours later near Marsh Harbor. He says he made his way through brush until he reached a boatyard where he contacted police. Lynette Hooker was last seen near Aunt Pat's Bay, near Elbow Cay and Hope Town, on the night of April 4th. Her husband reported her missing the following morning, April 5th. The local response was immediate. Richard Cook, the fire team lead with Hope Town Volunteer Fire and Rescue, coordinated the initial search in the waters around Elbow Cay and Hope Town. The Royal Bahamas Police Force launched what began as a search and rescue operation, dispatching vessels to scour the area around Aunt Pat's Bay and the surrounding stretch of the Sea of Abaco. The U.S. Coast Guard joined the effort. For days, boats moved in grids through waters that were, by day, shimmering and beautiful, and by night, completely indifferent to the fate of anyone searching them. Lynette was not found. No body surfaced. No swimming, struggling woman was pulled to safety. A flotation device Brian said he had thrown to his wife when she fell overboard was eventually located by Hopetown Search and Rescue. Brian left Carly Aylesworth a voicemail about this development. The voice in the recording, later shared with CNN by Aylesworth, is calm. "Hello, honey, I just got a call from Hopetown Search and Rescue, and they have found a flotation device that I threw to Mom when she fell overboard," Brian says in the voicemail. They haven't found her yet, but they can now focus all of their efforts in a smaller area. Carly Aylesworth did not learn what had happened from police or from the news. She heard it from Brian the day after her mother disappeared. Aylesworth told CNN her stepfather called her Sunday evening, around 8 to 8:30, and told her her mother was missing. He said, like matter of fact, "Hey, your mom is missing. We don't know where she is. She's been missing since last night, but we're gonna come up there soon to see you," Aylesworth told CNN. She said she felt like he just dropped a bomb on me, and then he kept talking before suddenly ending the call. And I was just like, okay, like what? How do you just lose my mom? The questions Aylesworth was asking privately were the same ones investigators were beginning to ask officially. Brian's account, on its face, raised a sequence of details that didn't sit easily together. Authorities and family members both questioned why Lynette had the ignition keys on her in the first place. The engine safety lanyard is typically worn by whoever is operating the vessel, not a passenger. Its presence on Lynette, according to Brian, is what cut the motor and left him stranded. But if that's true, why was she wearing it? Aylesworth's question was more direct and more damning. Why wouldn't he drop anchor and look for her? Why did he paddle the other way? She asked in an interview with CNN. Brian had paddled away from the spot where his wife had last been seen, away from her toward Marsh Harbor, spending hours moving through the water in the opposite direction from where Lynette had gone under. He said the currents were too strong, that the dinghy had no power, that he had no real choice. Critics called it the choice of a man who had already decided there was nothing left to find. On Tuesday, April 8, 2026, 4 days after Lynette vanished, the U.S. Coast Guard and local police transitioned the effort from a search and rescue operation to a recovery mission, the goal of which is to retrieve victims who are presumed to be deceased. That same day, the Royal Bahamas Police Force moved to take Brian Hooker into custody. The arrest came after Brian cooperated with authorities in an hours-long interview, and his attorney Terrell Butler described the development as shocking. Royal Bahamas Police Force Assistant Commissioner Eduardo Dames confirmed to Reuters that he was detained based on some probable cause. Butler told NBC News that her client fell overboard during his arrest. They took him to his vessel, the Soulmate, and he alleges that while he was attempting to follow the officer's instruction, while being handcuffed and holding a change of clothes in his hand, he fell overboard and had to be rescued, Butler said. Brian sustained a visible knee injury. It was a detail that his attorney raised repeatedly. A man recovering from a physical injury, a man grieving, a man being treated, in her words, without the benefit of the doubt. On April 10, investigators sat across from Brian Hooker for more than 3 hours. He was questioned at length about his relationship with his wife and whether he had caused her harm. The session was, according to his attorney, largely repetitive of prior questioning. Investigators wanted to know everything. The timeline of that evening, why Lynette had the lanyard, why he paddled away, the state of their relationship, the 2015 incident, the threats Aylesworth had described. Brian, through it all, maintained a single position. In a statement released to NBC News, Butler said Hooker categorically and unequivocally denies any wrongdoing. Bahamian authorities requested a 72-hour extension to continue holding him. Investigators questioned Brian for more than 3 hours on April 10, after which authorities requested the extension. His attorney described the extended questioning as largely repetitive of prior interviews. The legal clock in the Bahamas was ticking, and the evidence, at least what was publicly acknowledged, had not yet reached the threshold required for formal charges. Shanta Knowles, commissioner of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, told NBC News that authorities decided to release Hooker after consulting with prosecutors. Knowles said he remains a suspect as the investigation continues and that officials are still working to locate Lynette. On April 13, 2026, Brian Hooker walked out of police custody in Freeport, Grand Bahama. He said nothing to reporters. His attorney spoke for him. It was a very emotional time for him right now. His attorney Terrell Butler told reporters, "It's unfortunate they had to exhaust the entire investigative period to come to the conclusion." Butler stressed that no new evidence had been presented to justify his continued detention, and that her client had cooperated fully throughout. She had also, before the arrest, publicly appealed to the American public through the media. "I would ask those watching to treat him the way you would want to be treated, to give him the benefit of the doubt, and to consider that not all of us, nor you considering your own relationships the way you speak to one another, we all handle things in different ways," Crystal Marie Hauser, another Michigan-based attorney supporting the defense, said. But the Royal Bahamas police force was not finished. They made clear that Brian Hooker remained a named suspect. The investigation was not closed. It had simply outpaced what local authorities could hold him for under Bahamian law. While Brian walked free, Carly Aylesworth was doing what children of missing parents do. She was posting. She was appealing. She set up a GoFundMe to support the private search for her mother. She gave interview after interview, her grief raw and unperformed, asking the public to help find Lynette. She questioned her stepfather publicly, something she said she felt compelled to do because she believed the official investigation needed public pressure to stay focused. Aylesworth did not mince words about what she believed. She did not believe her mother had simply fallen overboard. She pointed to the couple's history. She pointed to what her mother had told her, that Brian had once choked her, that in 2024 he had threatened during a fight to throw her off the boat. Aylesworth said that, in January, her mother told her that Brian Hooker threatened to throw her off their boat during a fight in 2024. Hooker's attorney denied the allegations made by Aylesworth. But the words once public could not be walked back. The question they planted in the minds of anyone following the case was direct. Had the threat become reality on the night of April 4th? The text messages Lynette sent to Marnie Stevenson in early 2024 added another dimension to that question. These were not second-hand reports. They were Lynette's own words, sent when she believed the marriage was over. "It was real bad. I can't be out there with him," Lynette wrote to Stevenson. She had left. She had stayed at her mother's place in Florida. She had told Marnie she was done. And then she went back. The reasons, whatever they were, died with whatever happened on the water near Elbow Cay. The investigation broadened significantly in May 2026. The development that brought the case back to headlines was the U.S. Coast Guard Investigative Service publicly appealing for the owner of a separate sailboat that was moored near the Hooker's yacht Soulmate the night Lynette disappeared. Someone else had been out there that night. Someone on another sailboat anchored near the Soulmate might have seen something, heard something, that could break the case open. Investigators released images of that vessel and asked anyone who knew the boat or its occupants to come forward. Then came the Soulmate itself. Carly Aylesworth noticed in a Mother's Day video that the Soulmate had left the Bahamas. She said it was being moved by two men she did not recognize. "Neither of them are Brian. I've never seen them before," she said in the video. "They turned off their GPS." She said the boat appeared to be heading north toward Florida. She had not heard from the Coast Guard when she recorded the video. Hours later, the news broke. The U.S. Coast Guard seized the sailboat Soulmate, which departed Marsh Harbor on Friday and was taken into custody by the Coast Guard on Saturday while en route to the United States. Drone images obtained by CBS News showed the vessel docked at Fort Pierce Coast Guard Station in Florida, with crime scene tape draped across portions of the deck. Investigators wearing black shirts with yellow lettering, tan pants and blue gloves were seen searching the boat. The vessel that Brian and Lynette had named Soulmate, the one they had used to document a seemingly charmed life at sea, was now a crime scene. "It's the first Mother's Day without my mom," Aylesworth said in a video posted to social media. "It's pretty hard right now to know that she's not a text away anymore." As of mid-May 2026, the forensic processing of the Soulmate was underway. No charges had been filed. Lynette Hooker had not been found. No body, no confirmed physical evidence placing her in danger, no arrest. Brian Hooker had been released, remained a named suspect and had not spoken publicly. It was unclear whether Hooker would be required to stay in the Bahamas as the investigation continued or whether he was free to leave the country. What the Coast Guard found or didn't find aboard the Soulmate had not been publicly disclosed. The case was open, active, and accelerating. What this case asks, what it forces anyone paying attention to sit with, is not simply whether a crime occurred on the water near Elbow Cay on April 4, 2026. It asks a harder question. Lynette Hooker was a woman who knew, who had told a friend she could not be out there with her husband, who had been told by that husband, by her own account, that he would throw her overboard, who had been choked, according to her daughter, in the years before this trip, who had left and come back as people in complicated long-term relationships often do, who had posted photos of sunsets and paddleboards and smiling moments on a boat named for the very bond she was describing as broken in her private messages. The sea does not give up its stories easily. The Abaco Islands are beautiful and indifferent. The waters off Elbow Cay have no memory of what they took that night or what was done. What is left is a 55-year-old woman who loved the water, an investigation in 2 countries, a daughter who spent her first Mother's Day watching a boat named Soulmate disappear up the East Coast, and a question that remains, as of this writing, entirely unanswered. Where is Lynette Hooker? This case is ongoing as of May 2026. Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime and maintains his innocence through his legal counsel. All individuals are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. If you have information relevant to the disappearance of Lynette Hooker, the U.S. Coast Guard Investigative Service in Miami is actively seeking witnesses.